It's July 10th. I'm Ezra Levant, and you're watching Battleground. Oh, well, hello and welcome. I'm Ezra Levant. This is called Battleground. I'm the president of the Rebel.media. I have a regular show every day at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, but what we've been doing for a couple months now is every day at 12 noon Eastern Time, we have this live chat. Google actually invented something called Super Chat, and that means that in addition to regular comments that you can make in real time along the right-hand side of the screen, you can chip in a few bucks and make your comment a Super Chat. That pins it to the top of that panel, and it puts it in a bright color. Other folks can see it, and I can see it out of the corner of my eye. I got my laptop open here, out of the corner of my eye, I can see the bright color. And I promise to read all the Super Chats because I don't know if you know this, but we actually get a portion of the dough from Super Chat. It's a good workaround given that YouTube has demonetized conservative opinion sites such as ours. So thank you in advance if you want to chip in. We've got a lot of things I want to cover today. On my evening show tonight, I talk at length about Donald Trump's nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, to the Supreme Court of the United States. And I go through it a little bit, and I think my chief takeaway is I'm sort of jealous. As a Canadian, we don't have that process. We don't have scrutiny of our Supreme Court judges. They're just announced one day and it's done. And there's no vetting, and there's no chance at all that someone will be blocked, just none. It's not quite true, of course. The Canadian judicial establishment balked at one of Stephen Harper's judges and sued to stop him. But Stephen Harper actually did make 8 appointments to the Supreme Court of Canada, and he had one that was frustrated, but even Stephen Harper did not democratize the process, and even worse, I think, he didn't appoint conservative judges. Donald Trump is remaking America's judiciary for a generation to come. His appointee, his nominee, is in his early 50s. I think he's like 52 or 53. There is no retirement age for judges in the U.S. Supreme Court. In Canada, it's 75 years old. In the U.S., they serve as long as they want. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who's not quite all there, I don't think. She's always fallen asleep in the middle of things. She's 85. So this appointment, or this nomination that Trump is making could serve, to the year 2050? Theoretically, imagine that. Trump's reach will extend well to the midpoint of the century. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she's holding on with those little claws. She doesn't want to let go because she knows when she goes, Donald Trump is not going to appoint a hard left, alt-left radical activist like her. Like I say, Trump will remake the face of the U.S. Supreme Court, something Harper could have done but did not do. I don't want to spend any more time on that because I go really deep on the subject on tonight's show, and I encourage you to tune in. But I have some other things I want to show you. Of course, we just had the U.S. Independence Day, the 4th of July. And there's a very obscure comedian named Michelle Wolf, and she briefly had her moment when she was invited to be the guest comedian at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It's an annual thing. Donald Trump did not attend this year. Why would he? I mean, the correspondents despise him. Why would he go and endure that? He doesn't need them. They need him. It was a bit of a fiasco. It's a fiasco at the best of times. It was at the same White House Correspondents' Dinner, if I'm not mistaken, when Trump was in the audience and Barack Obama said, "You'll never be president, I am." And you could just sort of see Trump thinking, yeah, says you. Well, look who had the last laugh there. Trump did not attend this year, but Michelle Wolf did, and she bombed. It was a disaster. I mean, she's not that funny, a comedian to begin with. She's half her shtick is that she sort of talks like this. That's half the shtick, but just talking in sort of a baby, silly, Bronxy accent. That's not enough. You got to have some funny there. But what she lacked in funny, she made up for in partisanship, attacking Trump, obviously. I mean, duh, it's the White House Correspondents' Dinner. But she had this weird joke where she said, abortion, don't knock it till you try it, and then really knock it. And boy, it was a disaster. Some media groups said they were no longer going to attend the White House Correspondents' Dinner, but the celebrity entertainment media complex loved it and have given her her own show on Netflix. And So she did this 4th of July segment. I don't even know where it appeared. I don't even care, really. The fact that someone financed it is amazing to me. Take a look at Michelle Wolf. And what's the most important thing about the Independence Day, about the Revolutionary War, about the Constitution, about July 4th? What's the most important thing? Is it about a republic instead of a part of an empire? Is it about the Bill of Rights? Would it set the table for the emancipation of slaves? I don't know. What's the most important thing about the 4th of July? Well, if you're Michelle Wolf, it's abortion? Here, take a look.
Abortion, I salute you! Women, if you need an abortion, get one! If you want an abortion, get one! If you're not pregnant but you think you eventually might be and want to order a future abortion, get one! If you're pregnant and you want to be pregnant, don't get one! It's up to you, and it doesn't have to be a big deal. It's actually a great deal. It's about $300. That's like 6 movie tickets. Movie tickets, a bad deal!
Yeah, you know, my point is comedy should be funny. I'm not against left-wing comedy. I mean, there's some hilarious comedians on the left, although these days that's becoming more and more difficult to assert because so much of comedy is mocking things, showing contradictions, pointing out hypocrisy, and that's triggering. And if you know, a staple of comedy for so long, and maybe it's because so many Jews were in comedy and there's a self-deprecating nature to Jewish comedy. I mean, just think of Larry Seinfeld and Larry David, and Jerry Seinfeld, Larry David, and Curb Your Enthusiasm, Woody Allen. Is there anyone more self-deprecating? There's that style. And so a lot of comedians coming into a Jewish-style American comedy, if they were Hispanic, if they were Korean, whatever, if they were black, they would really work those riffs, right? I mean, black comedy is a whole other genre. It's not so Jewish, but you couldn't have a Chris Rock or a Eddie Murphy comedy routine, or I mean, those were real pioneers in black comedy. Richard Pryor. You couldn't do that comedy if you couldn't make fun of, in their case, blacks. In the case of the Jewish comedians, I listened, making fun of Jewish neuroses. Yeah, I think of Community, and I forget the name of the Asian comedian who was also the Spanish teacher. Hilarious. So much of the comedy comes from themselves and mocking their own ethnicity. That's illegal now under PC rules. That's why comedians don't go to campuses anymore. They're not allowed to tell any jokes. My point there is that I don't care if you're left-wing, you should be funny, but you're not allowed to be funny now in left-wing comedy. And you saw that abortion sketch there. Where's the funny part? I mean, I don't just disagree with their politics. I'm saying, can we please have a comedian who is funny? If you want an abortion, get one. How's that sort of funny? And you notice that was on Netflix. I thought that's what it was from, and it was. I saw, you know, Netflix just put Barack Obama's former senior advisor, Susan Rice, on the board. I think it's Susan Rice. And they just signed a multi, I think it's like an 8-figure deal with the Obamas, Barack and Michelle Obama, for a whole series of shows. So it really is Demflix, not Netflix anymore. I mean, it's being colonized by the left. I think that Netflix should have a diversity of views. That's my own point of view. If you don't like Netflix, don't buy it. It's a private company. No one's forcing you. It's not like the CBC or the BBC or the Australian Broadcasting Corporation or PBS. It's not subsidized. So, I mean, if they want to turn themselves into an Obama network, that's fine. I mean, you would think that they might want to do something new. Hollywood is already down the line Democrat. But just what gets me the most about that is how cringingly unfunny it is. And just a moment before we turn the camera on, our producer Hannah said, "Why would that be? Who would greenlight Michelle Wolf's comedy? I mean, she's manifestly unfunny. Seriously, go on YouTube. I did this when I first heard her name after the White House correspondent. Go on to YouTube, Google Michelle Wolf, and watch her comedy before she became infamous or famous at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. It is not funny. She was on one late night show dressed as adult Orphan Annie. So she was dressed up and she was just, that cringy voice is not enough. I think of Gilbert Gottfried. You know who I'm talking about? And Hannah, can you Google Gilbert Gottfried 50 Shades of Grey? And you know who I'm talking about. He has this voice and his face looks like this. I think he did the voice of Iago in that Disney movie, Aladdin. You know who I'm talking about. You'll know in a second. Gilbert Gottfried is funny. He did the Aflac commercials until he said something politically incorrect and was fired. Let me know when you got it. It's Gilbert Gottfried. Okay, I'm going to call for a clip in a second. Having a funny voice is a start to comedy. What was his name? Stephen Wright, who just told deadpan. I can't. But so a voice, a shtick is something, but you've got to have a joke underneath it. Just simply talking like this is not funny in itself. And saying, if you want an abortion, have one. That's not funny in itself. You want to see funny? Here's Gilbert Gottfried taking his voice, which I think he hams up. And what is the last thing you think of when you hear Gilbert Gottfried? I've lost the accent now. I want to play for you 60 seconds of Gilbert Gottfried. This, my friends, is comedy.
Bull.com presents 50 Shades of Grey, the erotic best-selling novel read by Gilbert Gottfried.
My inner goddess has stopped dancing and is staring too, open-mouthed and drooling slightly.
Hear it the way it was meant to be heard.
Keep still, he orders, and slowly he inserts his thumb inside me, rotating it around and around, stroking the front wall of my vagina. No fisting, you say? Anything else you object to? I agree to the fisting, but I'd really like to claim your ass.
Famed voice actor Gilbert Gottfried gives a reading that can only be described as sensual.
Holy fuck, is this wrong?
All right, what's the comedy there? Do I need to explain the joke? You know, explaining a joke, it's like dissecting a frog. And everyone's bored, and at the end of the day, the frog is dead, right? If you have to explain a joke, it's not funny, right? But I'll just tell you why that was funny. Because you have this voice, which is probably the least sexy voice in America, reading sensual chick lit that these, moms are listening to at the gym. And Fran, I'm sorry when he said, my vagina. You see, that's kind. I don't know Gilbert Gottfried's politics. I mean, I'm just guessing he's a Jew in comedy from New York. I'm guessing he's a Democrat. But he told a bloody funny joke. And I mean, that whole thing is more than a joke. It was a whole shtick. That's funny. He just didn't say, you want an abortion? Have an abortion. You want an abortion? It's great. Abortion. And then play a laugh track. That's not funny. That's not funny. Michelle Wolf is not funny. How did she get a show on Netflix being so painfully unfunny? Well, because she's just a Democrat with a laugh track under it. She just reads Hillary Clinton talking points with a laugh track. How does that get funded? That's back to the question that Hannah asked me before we went live. Well, not everything is on a dollars and cents basis. And we know this by looking at how Mark Zuckerberg acts, how Jeff Bezos acts, how Carlos Slim, the owner of the New York Times, acts, as George Soros acts. Once you have a certain amount of money, like Netflix, which is billions and billions of dollars, not everything is about money. In fact, you start to crave meaning other than money. I mean, Jeff Bezos, what's he worth? Over $100 billion now or something? I'd have to check his stock price. does it really matter if he's worth $200 billion or $100 billion? There's nothing he can't buy. So then you crave meaning, you crave power. As George Soros says about himself, he starts to think of himself as a god. I mean, of course he can get what he wants financially, but can he get what he wants morally, politically, religiously, aesthetically, whatever, any other way? And I put it to you that that is why Michelle Wolf has a gig. I do not believe it will make money. I do not believe that a lot of people will watch that deadly unfunny show. But it's not even about her, and it's certainly not about money. It is about the political will of the people who run Hollywood, who run Netflix, the people who just signed an 8-figure deal with the Obamas. The Obamas are not that interesting. I mean, I think people will watch out of curiosity. Donald Trump had a real showbiz flair. He did well as a reality show star. Who knows, maybe Barack Obama and Michelle Obama will be more interesting than we think. But I want to show you something. And Hannah, did you get that list I sent you? This is just from Wikipedia, so it's an amateur collection. I want to show you something that I recall seeing a decade ago when it happened. I'm in Toronto these days, and back then I had a friend who was on the board of the Toronto International Film Festival, and he would give me tickets, which was very nice, to these premieres of all these movies. And it was quite something. I mean, Toronto Film Festival was a bit of a big deal, and I was based in Calgary, but I would come out and, I would get 2, 4, 6, 8 tickets to these shows, and I felt like a bit of a big shot, and I would share them around, and I would go there, and the stars were there. I didn't say hello to most of the stars, but I was right there. It was very exciting. I have to tell you, the thing about the Toronto International Film Festival is most of the movies were awful. And I'm just sure I don't think anyone who attends would disagree. They're just awful. And I saw one movie premiere there, will premiere. It was called The Valley of Elah. E-L-A-H. That's some reference to the Bible. It was Tommy Lee Jones and Charlize Theron and Susan Sarandon. And you can tell by these names that Susan Sarandon, hard left wing, and Charlize Theron, I think, is left wing these days too. It was an anti-war movie. And I think this was 2007. So the Iraq War, remember 9/11 happened in 2001, late 2001. Iraq War really began in earnest in 2002 in Afghanistan. And this movie came out 2007, so it was probably commissioned 2005 or something. And it was still George W. Bush as president. And this was, can you put the Wikipedia list up by chronological order? So this is a list of anti-war films, and this is just some amateur list put together on Wikipedia. So you can see that there's been anti-war movies, but just slow down for a second. There's one in 1914 and one a couple years later. So during the entire course of World War I, you can see there's 3 anti-war movies. And then there's a few, like about one a year. And then scroll ahead, and then World War II, like there's 4 anti-war movies in the entire course of World War II. And then there's a couple during Korea, right, the 50s. And then move ahead there, and then Hollywood starts getting more political, and you're seeing, well, I guess there weren't that many during Vietnam. But scroll ahead to the year 2001. So, okay, you could see there's some anti-war movies in Vietnam. Sorry, I wasn't seeing the dates properly. I was looking at the 60s. So yeah, Hollywood really starts becoming counterculture. Lots of, The Deer Hunter, A Bridge Too Far, Slaughterhouse-Five, a lot of anti-war movies. Okay, then there's not a lot of wars going on because the Cold War sort of froze things up, and then in 1989, the Berlin Wall fall. And then scooch ahead to just skip way ahead to 2001. Okay, so 9/11 comes in, and there's really no anti-war movies. There's, one a year, there's a couple in 2001, a couple in 2002, there's one in 2003. And remember, you can't just make a movie by snapping your fingers, right? So it takes a year or two to commission a movie, get it going, film it, produce it, and release it. So you can see, and this is just some list that someone compiled. I don't even know all these movies. But can you see, 9/11 was 2001, war in Afghanistan and Iraq really kicks up 2002, 2003. But you see that all of a sudden in 2004, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 movies in 2004. And then scroll down to 2005. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or whatever. But can you remember any of these movies? 2006, I see, is the Valley of Elah? Yeah, In the Valley of Elah. You see that, 2007. That's the movie I saw. Horrible movie. I saw it at the premiere. So do you see how many? Look at 2007. 1, 2, 3. And when's that? That's in the year before the U.S. election, right? Scroll down to 2008. Look at all those. So this is softening up the public for Barack Obama, the Netflix boss. And again, can you even remember those movies? Stop Loss, remember that one? The War on Democracy. And there were so many of these. Put it down, but I'm gonna come back to this in a minute. There's so many anti-war movies. They were all flops. Not one of them was a box office success. Some of those movies had literally a few $100,000 in box office. $100,000, that wouldn't even pay for catering on a movie set. Why were, you saw, there were a few, there was a few and then a torrent. And then you saw it almost stop dead when Barack Obama took over in 2009. Why? There was still troops in Iraq, still troops in Afghanistan. The war was still ongoing. Why all of a sudden, in fact, could you put it back up now? I want to point that out. So do you see 2008, there were so many, and then Barack Obama's elected in the fall of 2008, and let me just make sure I'm looking at this carefully because these numbers are so small. There's a few movies that trickle out, and then it sort of stops. Do you see that? There's just no more anti-war movies. There just are none. How can that be? You've got all these different studios. The war is still raging. There are troops, and you just stop? Okay, now once Barack Obama is safely reelected in 2012, there's a few more in 2013, 2014. By the way, okay, thanks very much for showing that. Do you know the name of the only movie about war during those years that was a box office smash? Let me see put it in the comments if you can guess it. I'll tell you the answer right now. It was called 300. Do you want to grab the trailer to the movie 300 about Sparta? I forget the name of the star in that one. Gerard something. It was a hell of a movie. It was about a small group of Spartans at Thermopylae holding off Persians. They weren't Muslim back then, they were Persians. It's a real battle. Yeah, put up the B-roll. Yeah, we don't need the sound, but people will immediately recognize this film. It was a huge success. It was a little bit mystical. It was called 300. It was about how 300, they were Spartans, right? Am I remembering correctly? Stood at it was obviously brilliant cinematography, special effects, a little bit of sexiness. What's that guy's name? Gerard something. There was some great fights. Look at that guy. This movie was, I think it was the largest R-rated movie of the year. I'm going from memory again. If I'm wrong, don't be mad at me. Why was this movie so successful? Because it was about a small group of Western men defending against the Persian Empire and every horrible thing from the tyrants. And I don't know if you remember this scene here. Actually, can you roll back 10 seconds and give me audio of this wonderful scene? Roll back 30 seconds and give me audio.
Threaten my people with slavery and death. This is madness! Madness. This is Sparta! We will stand and...
All right, thanks. So, by the way, there was a lot of these cliche lines in that movie, like, we'll rain down so many arrows, it'll be like darkness, and so we'll fight in the night or something. Like, they had so many cliches. Those were actually Spartan sayings. Like, it sounds too cliche, but the reason they're cliche is because that's how the Spartans were. Why was that movie called 300? I think it was the biggest R-rated movie of the year. Because Americans and Canadians and Brits and people around the world wanted to cheer for the military, and this was the closest Hollywood would let them come. An ancient battle of Western men, Sparta, versus Eastern marauders and terrorists, Persia. And you saw that guy with all the metal on his face, that was the Persian emperor. You saw some of the freakish characters. It was a hell of a film. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. That was the closest Hollywood allowed America to get to patriotism and support the troops. That movie. 2 degrees of separation from, separate geographically, separate temporally, but that was as close as Americans were allowed to feel patriotic, and they loved that movie, not just because it was a feast for the eyes and very exciting, but because it was pro-Western and pro-war and pro-defend yourselves against long odds. And it's a hell of a true story also underneath it. There was a lot of cinematography, artistic license layered on top of it, but there really was a battle of Thermopylae. The fiery gates is what that means in Greek. And you're probably thinking, what are you talking about, Ezra? Why are you talking about movies? Because Hollywood will not give the people what they want, and the odd occasion where they do, it's a huge success. I think of, why don't you throw up the trailer with no sound of The Passion of the Christ by Mel Gibson. Not everyone agrees with Mel Gibson's theology. He's a little bit mystical too. He's a little bit controversial in some ways. But Mel Gibson's R-rated movie, I think that's the highest rated R movie of all time, speaking of R-rated movies, is Mel Gibson's The Passion. I'd love to show just some B-roll of that trailer. Mel Gibson could not get that movie produced. No studio would touch it. It was in Latin and Aramaic. Dead languages. Here we go. He's literally doing a movie in Latin, and it's the boring Christian Bible, and he did it anyways, and it was, what did it make, $1 billion? $1 billion. And there was good and evil, and there was, Jesus Christ was the star of it. James Caviezel. And Mel Gibson did that himself, and he became even richer. And it was politically incorrect because he talked about Caiaphas, the Jewish high priest, and he was not friendly about it. Okay, thanks for showing. That's a great movie if you haven't seen it also. Again, a visual feast for the eyes. Hollywood does not give people what they want. Hollywood does not allow people to have a pro-military, pro-troops movie, do they? But with 300 we got it. Hollywood does not allow people to have a blockbuster pro-Christian movie, do they? When Mel Gibson gave it to the people, it earned $1 billion. Instead, Hollywood serves up crap. Like Michelle Wolf, if you want an abortion, go get it. It's a bargain for $300. So that is not funny. And I promise you it will not make $1 billion like Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, or however much Gerard, what's his last name, made on 300. But that's not the point. Netflix, Hollywood, the Harvey Weinsteins of the world have made a decision that they are going to stick it to Trump the same way as they decided they were going to stick it to George W. Bush. There was this brief moment of about 15 minutes when all of America was patriotic and standing by America. That lasted about 15 minutes. And then Hollywood decided they were not going to just do thoughtful, nuanced movies about the war. They were going to have ham-fisted anti-war propaganda, and that's what we got. So I've just spent half of my show talking about a little clip with Michelle Wolf, the unfunny comedian, trying to explain the phenomenon of unfunny comedians. Because it's not about the comedy, it's about the politics. I see a couple super chats. Still Free in Vermont says, well, no comment, but $5, thank you very much. Tom Youngjohn says, I'm told that women comedians aren't funny. True or false? You know, I'm going to say false, because you can't just say 50% of the world isn't funny, because we know that's not true. Let me talk about two very liberal comedians, Sarah Silverman and Amy Schumer. Their early work was so funny, it was devastating. Can you call up some early Sarah Silverman? She makes a Jewish joke about, well, I'll just tell you the joke. But I'd love it if you could call it up. So I was raped, but he was a doctor, so mixed blessing, or something like an outrageous, abominable joke. It's a Jewish joke, but I'm Jewish, so, you know, she told that joke. Would you agree with me that's an outrageously dirty joke? But the way she told it, and again, that's the self-deprecating Jewish humor, right? She has Holocaust jokes. And the fact that she had anti-black jokes and anti-Chinese jokes. She's not anti-black, she's not anti-Chinese. She just said these jokes in a manner that was snortingly funny. And were they racist? I think they were. Were they funny? Absolutely. Did black and Asian people laugh along with it? Some did, some didn't. Were they funny? To answer your question, they were bloody funny. And Amy Schumer, in her early days, when she had to be funny, she had some funny stuff. But now it's all just sort of Trump derangement. Can you call up a Sarah Silverman clip? Just the early stuff. And she was so transgressive. And that's what I mean. The comedy comes from goring and skewering things you're not allowed to talk about. Have you ever heard the old saying, never a truer word spoken than in jest? When we joke about something, when we mock something, we tell the truth. As Orwell said, I think it was Orwell, every joke is a little revolution. Was that Orwell who said that? Or the other side of that would be Ayatollah Khamenei of Iran saying, there is no humor in Islam. Of course not, because you can't mock things. If something is powerful and authoritative and established, by definition you cannot mock it. That is contrary to the order of the ummah, of the world. So yeah, in answer to your question, Tom, women can be funny. Absolutely. And by the way, everyone's sense of humor. You go to a comedy club, and I haven't been in a while. I wonder if comedy clubs are even funny anymore. I mean, so many trigger warnings would have to be spoken. But it's been a while, but you go to a comedy club and you have the same experience we all do. You laugh at a joke that the guy next to you doesn't laugh at. He laughs at a joke that you don't think is funny. Yeah, it's because each of us has a different sensibility and a different aesthetic sense. Some people love Howard Stern. Other people cringe. You know, some people like the Jeff Foxworthy, you might be a redneck if. I just think that my point about corporate commercial comedy is so homogenized and Baudelarized and Netflixized that you're basically just getting Democrat talking points, whether it's in comedy or whether it's in cinema. Have I proved my point to you? I think I have proved it and then flogged it to death. Okay, let's get back on the show. Let's get back on, because I want to talk about more than just Michelle Wolf, and forgive me for going on at some length. I want to skip ahead to the United Kingdom, because I've been following the United Kingdom more since we put a little footprint down there a year or so ago when Tommy Robinson joined us. And I visited there and I follow it, and the Brexit, I think, was the premonition of Trump's 2016 landslide. So I have to tell you, I've cared more about the United Kingdom in the last 2 years than I have in the last 20. Why would a Canadian follow UK politics? Why would an American follow UK politics? Well, I'll give you two good reasons right now. Number one is they're trying to unhook themselves from the swamp in Brussels, Belgium, which is the head of the EU. That's a template for what Trump's trying to do in America. The nationalist, populist, anti-elite sentiment, that's the template. And number two, with open borders migration, especially of the Islamic variety, and the Islamification of the 5P professionals, police, politicians, the press, prosecutors, and professors, the Islamification of the 5P professionals in the UK, and the effect that's had, for example, on our friend Tommy Robinson. What happens in the UK today happens in Canada in 5 years, happens in America Well, let's see. If Hillary Clinton had won, it would be happening in America now. With Donald Trump, maybe that fate has been kicked down the road a little bit. So yeah, I'm interested in the United Kingdom. And boy, they're having an interesting time. Their foreign minister, Boris Johnson, formerly mayor of London, quit. He quit, as did other leading Conservative MPs, because their Prime Minister, Theresa May, is not pulling the UK out of the European Union. That's what Brexit stands for, British exit, exit from the EU. That vote was held more than 2 years ago, and yet it has not been affected. So look at this poll. We've got a poll here by YouGov. And here's what's in it. Jeremy Corbyn, he's the leader of the hard left-wing Labour Party. It's an Islamist party increasingly. Hard left-wing. I think it's fair to call him a communist. I don't think he would accept that appellation, but his views really are indistinguishable from, let's say, Venezuela's. So he's at 27% in who would make the best PM. Theresa May, the incumbent, that's the wobbly, tepid Conservative leader. I don't even want to call her the Conservative leader because that's a misnomer. But look at that. 36% of voters say, yeah, I don't know. Can you believe that? Have you ever heard in Canada or the United States or in the UK before, for that matter, have you ever heard none of the above literally in first place? That's what this poll says. None of the above. And then throw in the 3% who refuse to answer. That's really 39% of Brits do not want, and they won't even, like they're asked the question, who do you think is going to make best Prime Minister, Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn? And despite the prompting, they say, yeah, man, I don't know. And it's not those two. That is incredible. And then you have Nigel Farage hinting that he might actually throw his hat in the ring again if Theresa May, he doesn't hint it, he said it, if Theresa May doesn't pull the country out of the European Union. Very interesting times. I don't know if you've watched my interviews, they're on YouTube, but they were also on my show. I interviewed Gerard Batten, speaking of Gerards, he's the new leader of the UKIP, and Anne-Marie Waters, she is the leader of a new party called For Britain. So it'll be curious to see. I see UKIP is edging up in the polls again. And it'll be interesting if For Britain gets any traction also. People are clearly unhappy. And wouldn't you be too? If the Tory party, if the Conservative Party was the party that called the Brexit referendum and then said we will negotiate Brexit, and 2 years have gone by and they are not out, would you not be dismayed and disillusioned as well? I think you would be. Let's check the time. It's 12:37. Have I missed any super chats? I think I've got them all. Hannah will email me if I haven't. All right, do we have an ad? Let's play the ad from yesterday while I have a sip of water.
It was one of the largest manhunts in history, and he was found right here.
What a huge celebration for freedom, what a huge celebration for Western civilization.
It would be the worst depression in Canada since the dirty 30s.
All these lies just to stir up uninformed lefties.
It all started on Twitter, as anything worth mentioning does.
Nothing's ever going to happen because the police are so terrified of this ever getting out.
As we all know, this isn't the first time that Catherine McKenna has driven her Twitter account right into the ditch.
They will not let us win another election with our old tactics. Meme control is underway.
The Trump derangement syndrome is off the charts.
The Rebel, lots of faces there, and we got to add Menzies into that. I don't know why he wasn't in there, but we got some great talent, don't we? Have you seen those videos yet, by the way? Have you seen Martina Marcota's videos? She joined us about a month or two ago she's in London. As you can tell, she's an American from her accent, but she's in London. She's got some great thoughts to share about aesthetic matters and beauty and nature and culture. And it's a little bit a different beat. Reminds me a little bit of Barbara Kay. And Ben Davies, he's a working actor in Hollywood, and he's conservative and Christian, so he's like a unicorn out there. It's like he's the only one. And Amanda Head is actually, I guess she'd be the other one, calls herself the Hollywood conservative. We've got a good lineup here at the Rebel. I hope you're watching those. Most of that's on. Most of those folks are on YouTube. Some of them have those shows there, as you can see. So I'd encourage you to consider subscribing for $8 a month. Oh yeah, and Katie Hopkins. I mean, amazing, just great. I'm going to read some comments because I've been rambling for about 40 minutes straight. But I did manage to show you 2 film trailers from 2 of my favorite movies. I'm just going to start reading some comments. Tammy Putinsk-Zanbelt says, Martina's segments are fantastic. I agree, and I'm glad you think so. And Tammy, by the way, I got your notes. Our show from last night that was unfortunately cut off, we have re-uploaded the full version, so if you want to see the end of the show, that's on there. Sorry for that technical glitch. Andy Morrow said 2 more MPs just resigned in the UK. Yeah, I saw a couple names, and I'm just not that familiar. They're not household names to me over here in Canada. But yeah, it looks like a little bit of momentum, and people are thinking, well, yeah, do I want to be the last one off the sinking ship? Matt Gett says, Viktor Orban rules. Yeah, you're referring to Hungary's leader. I need to study him more to learn more. There's a language barrier. There's not a lot of content from Hungary out here, and so much of it is torqued and spun because Soros, of course, is Hungarian in his nature. So there's a lot of hate out there towards Orban. It's tough to sort through the propaganda and get to the truth, but I would like to learn more about that. John Zealand, the Rebel T-shirt madness, Trudeau groper. Hey, can we put up the image of our store? You see that image there? It's a knockoff or a satire of Shepard Fairey's Hope poster for Barack Obama. You surely recognize that iconic style. Well, that's Justin Trudeau with both eyebrows on. Grope. And I gotta tell you, the shirt is selling. We sold out briefly this morning, and I was sort of in a panic mode, but it is back on. There's going to be a little bit of a back order, but you'll get it later this month. May I encourage you to get your Grope shirt? Do you want to click on the shirt itself just to show people what the shirt looks like? There you go. I tell you, you wear that around town, it is a conversation starter. And keep that up for a second. It's not like wearing a MAGA hat, a Make America Great Again hat. Because you wear a MAGA hat, and you're just basically saying, I'm a Trumpist, right? And so some other Trump guys will say, hey man, good on you. And then every anti-Trump hater, and there's a lot of them, especially in Canada, Trump derangement syndrome, they're going to come up to you and probably throw something at you. But you wear this shirt, Grope, and what's going to happen? You're not saying you're a Trumpist or whatever. You're just mocking Trudeau. So I don't know. I don't think you're going to get the same negative reaction because are people, what are they, defending his groping? And you're not even saying you're a right winger. You're just saying, oh yeah, we got a groper as a, like, I think this is a different thing. I think first of all, you got to have a lot of conversations. Second of all, it's funny. MAGA's not funny. MAGA's just saying, I'm flying the Trump flag. By the way, you should do it. But this is not just flying a flag. This is a joke. And it's a substantive conversation starter. You wear the Trump hat, and all you're saying is, here's who I am, come and fight me. You wear the Grope shirt, and by the way, that's our, as you can see, that's our URL, gropeshirt.com. Just in case you're wondering where to get one, gropeshirt.com. You're saying, I want to talk about this issue, and I'm not sweeping it under the rug. And seriously, if someone comes up to you, hey man, you shouldn't wear that shirt, man. Why? Are you covering up for Chester the molester? Why are you covering up for the Harvey Weinstein of Canada? Why? So if they come up to you and say, why are you wearing that? Automatically, they are on the back foot because they're defending a molester. And so I think it's going to be a much more positive street experience. I got a lot of shirts that the missus does not like me to wear out and about. She says, why are you always looking to cause a reaction? I got a ton of shirts with messages on them. The MAGA hat, I got one of those. I got to make Ontario great again hat also. I like that one. I wear that one around. And I went over, there was a kid's party, and there was a bunch of the dads in the garage hanging out, and I went in, and I knew some of them were liberal. and that's okay. And I wore my Make Ontario Great MOGA hat. And then I started saying, well, come on, don't you want to make Ontario great? I mean, come on, let's make Ontario great. You weren't getting that. So I really had a good time talking to these dads, encouraging them to put their shoulder to the wheel to make Ontario great again. So I had a good experience there. I wore my Free Tommy Robinson hat to one of the kids' baseball games. And the missus was saying, why are you wearing that? Why always? And I said to her, you wear a Free Tommy Robinson hat. The only people who know what that means, at least in Canada and America, are Tommy Robinson supporters. Now, you know, you're in Luton, UK, or some parts of the UK, you're going to have some Antifa types and you're going to have some Ali Dawa Islamist types who'll know what that means. So I don't know how it would go over in the UK, but in Canada, or in Israel, where we were with Katie and we had that Tommy Robinson chant, you wear a Free Tommy Robinson hat, 95% of people are going to say, who's Tommy Robinson, what's that all about? So at the very most, they're going to say, who's that? And you can tell the story if you like. But if you're wearing a Free Tommy Robinson hat, and if someone knows, they're an ally, am I right? So I really enjoyed wearing my Free Tommy Robinson hat to the kids' baseball game. And I got some other shirts too, I won't go into that now. But my point is, I think you're going to get some good conversations on the street from the Grope shirt. In fact, I mean, obviously I'm going to get a Grope shirt. I think we should do an experiment. You know that iconic video of that gal who, you know, a shapely, attractive young lass who walked through New York behind someone who had a little GoPro, and they sort of videoed all the construction workers saying, hey baby, looking good. Remember that? If you want to call up the video, the B-roll of that, people will recognize it. So there was this attractive young woman who walked through New York for 8 hours filming hundreds of cat calls, and she compressed this and it was put as some sort of proof of how sexist New York was. I watched it. And my first reaction was, boy, I would feel great if 100 people on the street told me I looked good. Like, they weren't sexual, they weren't aggressive. So they were like little come-ons and whatnot. Remember this girl? Yeah, I mean, some people were saying smile. But look, what's up, beautiful? Have a good day. Hey, what's up, girl? How you doing? Somebody's acknowledging you for being beautiful. You should say thank you more for, I mean, so God bless you, mommy. I mean, I'm sorry, if I were to walk through a city and people were to say, hey, handsome, I would assume they're not talking to me. If they'd say, hey, like if someone said, damn, I'd say, what, is there like spinach in my teeth? If someone called me sexy on the street, hello, good morning. So you see my point? This was an attempt at showing how tough it is to be a woman in New York. I got to say, this would make me feel great. This guy walking next to her for 4 minutes, I wouldn't like so much. And by the way, there's a bit of an ethnic overlay here. Different cultures have a different approach to this young woman. So, but if people just said, how you doing all day to me, I would, someone said, I just thought $1,000. Sorry, that's not bad. Okay, enough. My point is, I'd like that experience. Was that rough? I mean, maybe you get tired of it, get tired of being good looking, get tired of people saying how good looking you are. I'm guessing when you're 70 years old, you're going to look back at that and say, I used to make all the boys' heads turn. Or in my case, I used to make all the ice cream trucks veer over and say, there's a customer. Those were the days. That's the only reaction I get on the street, is all the food carts, hey, best customer, hey, come here. And of course the buffets say, no, we're closed. That's the only reaction I get. I walk down the street in Manhattan, and the food cart guys, they see what they call a whale. There's a whale. Reel it in. There's $100 at our hot dog stand. That's the reaction I get on the street. Back to the subject at hand, and we're almost out of time. You wear that Grope shirt, you're going to get some great reactions. Hannah, I think we should send some people out on the streets of Toronto wearing that Grope shirt with sort of a hidden camera, to see what they get, or maybe it's just plain old interviews, because I bet they're going to be interesting conversations. So let's think about doing that. I picture Menzies doing it, and I picture sort of a undercover-y thing. Let's see what happens. Let's get for the real Vox Populi. This is an idea. We're almost out of time. I'm going to read some more comments here. Bim Jim says, she is massively hot. Kendra Oppenheim says, Ezra, you do not want that if you're a blonde girl getting hit on my blacks all the time. Well, people of all races were calling out to her. And I didn't hear, that one guy who walked next to her for 4 minutes, that would creep me out. But saying, you look great, how are you doing, you're beautiful. I'm sorry, I just disagree. I don't think that's a bad thing. Slant, he's too ethnically Jewish to be sexy. I don't know, are you talking about me? Petra Heinrichs, Ezra, you're hot like Tom Cruise. Yeah, like the Tom Cruise in, what's that movie where they, the Thunder? You know that movie? Tropic Thunder. YouTube, Tom Cruise, Tropic Thunder. I think that's the Tom Cruise you're talking about. The dance scene. Tropic Thunder, Tom Cruise dance scene. So yeah, Petra, I am hot like Tom Cruise in the movie Tropic Thunder, in the dance scene, and I'm just going to wait for that video, because no pressure on the producers. That is a bizarre movie. It's very funny. And here's Tom Cruise.
And the Oscar goes to... Yes! Tut Speedman!
Where's the dance scene? Okay, stop the video. It's Tom Cruise dancing, folks. I'm going to Google it for you. Okay, put it up. Tom Cruise, ladies and gentlemen. Tom Cruise. Am I hot like him?
Here's another one, and another one. Why you all in my ear? Talking a whole bunch of shit that I ain't trying to hear. Get back, motherfucker, you don't know me like that. Get back, motherfucker, you don't know me like that. So come on, no.
I don't have enough hair on my chest.
Swung on, it's the knick-knack, paddywhack, still riding Cadillac.
I don't think I have enough hair on my chest to compete with that Jewish Tom Cruise character. All right, well, it's 12:52. I want to get back to serious things. I don't know why I'm being so silly. Let's just look a little bit at some more comments. John Vaught is a Trump fan. Yeah, he's always been right-wing, hasn't he? That's Angelina Jolie's dad. Tom Youngjohn, Tropic Thunder, funniest movie ever, seen it 4 times. It is a very funny movie. It's not just a funny movie, but there's little movies within the movie. The opening trailers to the movie are extremely funny, including the rapper who has his energy drink. I see some super chats. Tame Thing 1 says, PM Nigel, love that. Rebel bumper stickers coming. Okay, there's a few things there. Prime Minister Nigel Farage, well, I wish. I think he's more sort of threatening things, threatening to come back, hoping that Theresa May does the right thing. But maybe he really will come back. And when you've got the number one contender being none of the above, maybe that's a Nigel Farage situation. Thomas Jefferson says, not a MAGA, a Bill Clinton rape shirt. Laugh out loud. You know, it's funny, there's some very thoughtful, sly American shirts. I've seen the Bill Clinton rape shirt you're referring to. Hillary for prison. Like there's, you know, the Hillary for president. There's a lot of shirts I've seen, Hillary for prison, and you have to look carefully to see it says prison. Those are pretty sly also. I've seen a lot of those. Chom Youngjohn, wear a MAGA hat, get physically attacked. Unfortunately, that is the case. I've seen that happen. Even in Canada, we've seen that happen. It's 12:54, but I think we do have time just to play. Actually, I'm going to skip our immigration segment. Maybe we'll do that tomorrow. But I want to show you one. I want to end. I've been just very kibitzey today, talking about movies and accents and that. Would you agree with me that Gilbert Gottfried sketch was one of the funniest things you've heard today? I mean, when he says the word vagina, I'm sorry to say that word, I don't use that word a lot. It's nothing wrong with the word, I just don't need to say it. When Gilbert Gottfried says the phrase, my vagina, in this voice, that's probably the funniest thing you're going to hear all week. That's comedy, my friends. But let me show you some comedy in real life, because sometimes things are too on the nose. You know what I mean, like that? I mean, you send a pitch to Hollywood, speaking of Hollywood, you send a pitch and it's just too perfect. And an agent, someone who's looking through scripts is going to say, that's just too pat. It just wouldn't be that way. That's just too obvious. You got to be more subtle. No one's going to buy it. And then you see a headline like this. The Toronto's Chief Medical Officer calls for decriminalization of all drugs, man. The original draft was Chief Medical Officer calls for decriminalization of all drugs, man. And then they changed that for personal use. So are you, that's just too perfect. Let me read the first line. Toronto's Medical Officer of Health is pushing for the decriminalization of all drugs, man, for personal use as part of a shift to a public health approach to overdose prevention in the midst of a deadly and worsening crisis. So you're trying to get to overdose prevention, so you want to legalize all drugs in the midst of a deadly epidemic because, man, let me read some more. Doctor, they should put doctor in scare quotes. Dr. Eileen de Villa, let me guess, University of Port-au-Prince, Haiti. I'm just guessing. I shouldn't be mean. There are some real doctors in Haiti. Is urging the city's Board of Health to call on the federal government to decriminalize possession of drugs for personal use while scaling up prevention, harm reduction, and treatment. So you want to prevent it, but you don't want to prevent it, man. She's also recommending Ottawa convene a task force. That's always a good idea. Made up of people who use drugs. Yeah, I'm guessing that's not a good idea. Dude, you should tell, I got all my friends and we get high and we sort of are a task force and we thought we should get a task force of people who use drugs, man. Yeah, man. I just don't think this is a good idea. This is not The Onion. This is the largest newspaper in Canada. I just want to show one more detail here. The author of this article, the journalist, her name is Emily Mathieu, and her title at the Toronto Star is Affordable Housing Reporter. The absolute state of Canada in 2018. If you are a chief medical officer and you are calling for the legalization of all drugs, cocaine, heroin. There is an epidemic of opioids. I don't exactly know what those are. A lot of them are sort of pain drugs and stuff, oxycodone, things like that. Thank God I don't have any close connections to that horrific epidemic. But we are in that epidemic. It's big in the States. It's big in Canada too. You're in the middle of a drug epidemic that is killing people. And your best advice is, hey man, just more drugs, man. Just make them not illegal, man. And then you see we've got this task force of drug users. I think that's a bit of false advertising if you're calling yourself a chief medical officer. I'm just going to go out on a limb there and say it's sort of opposite of every single thing you said. I think that your best medical advice is what you said and then the word not after it. And can you Google how much that chief medical officer, she's probably not under the sunshine list because she works for the city. I bet she's clocking $250,000 a year. I don't think you can find it on the sunshine list unless there's a civic one. I bet she's getting $250,000 a year to give this kind of quality advice, legalize all drugs, man, and put together a task force. If you're high, are you really up? Should it really be called a task force if you're high? Are you really likely to complete a task if you're on drugs, other than like having lots of munchies and stuff? Oh, I see a super chat. Keith McIntosh, your shipping options for the t-shirt, $17? That's crazy. Way cheaper ways to ship a t-shirt. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. We have adjusted our shipping options once already. It sounds like they're still out of whack, and I'm going to bring that to the attention of we've been wrestling with them on the shipping price all day, and we've lowered it, and I'm going to try and get that fixed. Now, are you in Mexico? Because I see you're chipping in Mexican pesos. If you're in Mexico and it's a $17 shipping charge, that might explain it. But yeah, you're right, that is bloody expensive, and I'll talk to our store about that. But I tell you, hundreds of people have bought that Grope shirt. And I want to do that experiment on the street. And maybe we should hire a beautiful girl to walk through the streets of Toronto with a Grope shirt on. And maybe we should hire an opposite-looking person, like maybe even myself or Menzies, to do that. That's our show for today. It was a little bit silly, but I enjoyed it, and I didn't get through all the substantive stuff. If you want the substantive TV, tune in to my show at 8 p.m. tonight, where we're going to talk about the Supreme Court of the United States and the Supreme Court of Canada. My friends, we're done. Until tonight, on behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters, to you at home, goodbye, and keep fighting for freedom.